Today we're going to show you how to assemble an 8 GPU mining rig on the Cella Design 8 GPU open air frame. So what you want to start with is you want to take your Q1 screws, your bag of Q1 screws, and you want to start putting in the screw holes for your ATX motherboard. So the screw holes on this bottom acrylic board is for ATX aligned motherboards. So you'll be putting the screws in here, 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 and up there. So for reference, just to make sure you know exactly every screw, you'll take your ATX motherboard and you'll place it in and align it up. Make sure you know every screw exactly, just in case some ATX motherboards do not utilize every single screw hole. So you'll want to make sure you put your motherboard here first, so you know exactly every screw hole that you do utilize. Which we will be using the Z278 motherboard, one of the best motherboards for 8 or 9 GPUs, and pretty much any of the lines of Z270 Prime by ASIC. So we'll go ahead and take the long screw, the short screws, and the center nut, and you'll start attaching them. The long screw will go through the bottom, and then you'll screw the center nut through the top. So now that you have them all attached, now you'll put your motherboard down on the screw, on the little spacers, and then you'll start putting it in the small screws. So now you'll use all the small screws. You'll go ahead and screw it all down. Recommend not going tight at first, just doing a little snug until you get every screw in. So now that you have all the screws fully tightened on, you have the entire unit screwed in, now you'll want to attach your solid state drive or your hard drive or whatever you're doing, and you're using just a USB drive, and don't even worry about this step. But you'll take if you're using a solid state drive like we are, you'll use the Q3 screw, the Q3s. But if you're using a hard drive, a regular disk hard drive, you'll use the Q2 screws. And we prefer to make sure you put your SATA ports facing the direction where your plugins are going to be, so you don't have any issues there. We like to use it about right here on the middle slot. Of course, if you do have multiple solid state drives or hard drives, you can do multiple, but since this is a mining rig, you really should only have one, unless you're going to be mining storage coins like burst or storage or any of those type of deals. You do have extra screws if you have multiple, plus you have an extra just in case one is lost. Next step you'll do is now you will take your power supplies, and it comes with rubber feet. You'll receive 8 rubber feet, so you'll have 4 for each power supply. And you'll go ahead and put your rubber feet on your power supplies. So you want to make sure you're putting it on a high point. So if you do put it in a ridge, you want to make sure it's high enough that it will stick and it will stand on those feet. So we usually just put them straight in the corners. These will prevent vibrations and allow the fan on the PSU to work well. It gives it enough room. You'll go ahead and face this just like this, with the cables facing forward, and put it back here for where the first one goes, and do the same with your second power supply. We're using 850 watt G3s by EVGA, the 80 plus. For an 8 GPU system, we recommend at least 650 watts each. if you're going to be going for a full 1070 system with single 8-pin ports or 6-pin ports on your 1070s. Now if you're going to go for 3 fans that have 14-pin plus required, then you'll want to go with at least two 750 watt systems. Now that you have it like that, you will be taking the Q4 screw. You'll be taking your Q4 screws, and attaching those to the back side of the power supplies. You are given 1 extra screw just in case one is lost or there is an issue with the screw. So now that you have the PSUs attached, you'll go ahead and start assembling your motherboard. So you'll want to attach the RAM. 4 gigs of RAM is all that's recommended, all that's needed, but we recommend using at least 8 gigs of RAM. We'll use the Vengeance LPX DDR4. So you'll want to put it in the recommended slot, which on this motherboard is slot 2. And then you want to go ahead and put in your CPU, which for this build, we are using the Celeron G3900, the LGA 1151. So that's the slot on the motherboard. And we already have that here. On this motherboard, it gives you a little black bracket to go ahead and use. So you'll go ahead and assemble that. And you'll take your fan. We do recommend wiring your cables through the fan so it does not get in the way. You don't want your fan to get in the way at all. And then your fan will go ahead and plug in right in here into the white slot. Now you'll want to go ahead and grab all your cables for your PSU. So what we're going to use is we're going to use every slot except for 1 periph and 1 CPU on 1 unit. So now you'll want to attach your motherboard cables. We're going to use a 2 PSU connector where you'll hook up this part to your main PSU, this part to your secondary PSU, and then this will go straight into your motherboard. So we're going to use the right one as our main PSU. So go ahead and hook up your main PSU first. So start by hooking up the motherboards, then we'll put the CPU in. Then you can go ahead and attach your CPU over here to your motherboard. We'll worry about cable management closer to the end. And your next step is to hook up all the VGAs. You'll hook up all VGAs on the entire system. We recommend putting them above the CPU cable and above the motherboard cable, as they're going to go straight up. When you order your power supply, you'll receive a majority of just mostly single pin, but for our build, we've transferred them over to duals because we're using a majority of 14 plus pin GPUs. Then you'll go ahead, so now that you have those, you'll put those above the motherboard and above the CPU. And then now you'll want to attach your SATAs, your 3 SATAs. So now on your secondary power supply, you'll want to do the same thing, but you're not going to use a CPU cable, but you're going to add 1 periph. So go ahead and plug in your periph. And then you can go ahead and plug in your SATAs. So plug in your 3 SATAs. So now you want to go ahead and attach all your VGA cables. So for this build, we're using 6 14 plus pin GPUs along with 2 8-pin GPUs. So we have extra than you usually receive. We just transferred it from another unit. So go ahead and finish plugging all your VGAs now. And then now you'll plug in your other motherboard cable. If you're going to be using more than 7 GPUs on this motherboard, you'll want to use an M.2 adapter. So here's our M.2 adapter, and you'll want to plug it into either this M.2 slot or that M.2 slot. If you're going up to 9 GPUs, you can go ahead and plug in an M.2 into both, and it'll run perfectly fine. But we're only going to be using 8 GPUs on this system because we use Windows 10 on all of our systems. And Windows 10 will only allow 8 of the same drivers being used, so you can only have 8 NVIDIA or 8 AMD, or 16 in total, 8 AMD and 8 NVIDIA. So when you're doing your M.2 adapter, you'll want to go ahead and plug it in here. You start at a little angle, and then you want to make sure it looks perfectly aligned up. You want to make sure nothing is showing on either side because they can easily be unaligned. And you do not want an unaligned M.2 because then it won't be reading and you'll have a bunch of errors and you'll be working on figuring out why your M.2 isn't working. Now we recommend to put it in the first hole just because you get more stability and structure support. So go ahead and make sure it's all realigned before you finish screwing it in. Now the M.2, they do come with a power cable, but you do not need to use the power cable if you're only going to be using one M.2. It will be receiving enough power and you won't have an issue. But if you want to be on the safe side, you can use the power cable. It's not going to change anything. It'll just be using a very slight amount of power to power the board instead of pulling power from the motherboard. So now you'll go ahead and grab your 2 PSU connectors and you'll go ahead and put the side with the majority of the cables that will attach to your main PSU. That will attach to your main motherboard cable. You want to make sure they are under all of those after you go ahead and attach this. So you'll go ahead and attach it right on this piece. The part that's sticking out here will go to that. That'll make a lock attach. Then you'll go ahead and go to your secondary, which make sure it's of course underneath every single cable. Do the same thing. That part goes with this part, goes with this. Go ahead and run them underneath all of your cables. And you can go ahead and take this part, and this will plug straight into your motherboard. So you'll plug that into your motherboard like normal. Make sure it's plugged all the way in. And that'll pull power from both power supplies, and both power supplies will start up and run perfectly fine. So now you want to go ahead and start attaching all your risers. And for your risers, so when you purchase your risers, you'll see they come in these anti-static bags. Go ahead and pop them open. And for this build, most of these risers that you purchase will have a foam bottom. This foam bottom is so they can sit without being screwed in, but they do have screw holes for you to go ahead and screw them in. Now for this build, you do want to go ahead and cut out a little piece of the foam under each screw hole. And how we do that is we usually just go ahead and just tear it out. Just go ahead and tear it, or use a pair of scissors, use a pair of dikes, whatever you want to use, so you don't have any issue. But you just want to make sure that the entire screw hole is fully showing. So you'll want to cut it out just like that, but for all 4 screw holes. So now for the next step, you'll want to go ahead and attach all your risers all the way down. And what we recommend is we recommend using the version 7 or the version 006C, and those are just the majority that are used. We've never had any real issue with them. So when you're attaching your risers, you'll want to go ahead and use the screws. This other bag of screws is similar to the motherboard screws. So you'll go ahead and take out those, and you'll use the long screw, go through the acrylic, put the spacer on, and then you'll use the small screws to screw on the risers. Let me do one and then go ahead and cut. So we'll show you how to do one real fast. So go ahead and attach those. We do recommend when you are doing these to make sure you put them either in the same spot, either on the top, each one of these in the same exact spot, so each one of these risers will be completely aligned. We usually use the very far back, so we push them back on each one. So now you'll go ahead and do that 7 more times, and we're going to skip to that. So now for the peripheral cable, we're going to use the peripheral cable to power these 2 Molexes. Now if you're not going to be using 2 Molexes, we just had 2 extra Molexes laying around, which is why we're going to be using them. But if you're not going to be using 2 Molexes and you're going to be using all 6-pin to SATA, you'll just run the 6-pin to SATA, you'll take this one to power that SATA, and then you'll take your 3 SATA cables on this side. One will power one will power one, and then the third SATA will power these 2. But for our case, we're going to be using 1 peripheral cable to power the 2 Molexes. So again, we're going to be wrapping it around the outside so we can do cable management against this bar. So you'll go ahead and plug everything in. Now of course, if you're going to be using this for a fan assembly, you are given all the pieces for the fan assembly to attach. So you'll go ahead and take your pieces. These will attach your fans together. You'll put them in the screw holes, and then you'll attach it to this bar by popping off the cap, putting in the square metal piece and screwing it in, and you can have a full-blown fan assembly. But since we are not using the fan assembly, we're just gonna use this bar as cable management. So go ahead and take your last 3 SATAs and plug them all in. Okay, so now you'll have all of your risers powered. So now your next step is to go ahead and start plugging in your GPUs. Now for this, we're going to be using 3 Aorus 1073 fans, 3 EVGA FTW2 fans, a G1 Gaming 1070, and then we will also be using a hybrid, which is a water-cooled 1070, which is the C-Hop X. So go ahead and start attaching all your GPUs. And if you followed our guide, your GPU should be pretty much on par with the screw holes, and they'll be ready to screw on in. So go ahead and just plug them all in, and then we'll screw them in right after. And if you have latches, go ahead and tighten down your latches, so you make sure everything's nice and tight and held on. But in reality, since we are using screw downs, you do not actually need all the latches to be fully tightened down. We're just gonna push the latches on so they're a little snug. We're not gonna fully make sure everything's fully latched down. So to screw in all of these pieces, you'll be using Q8 screws. Go ahead and take your Q8 screws. So now that all the GPUs are fully attached, fully screwed in and everything, so now you see they're all nice, structurally sound, everything's plugged in. You'll want to go ahead and attach all your PCIe 1x with the USB. You're going to want to plug the USB in. You want them to go inside of the bar because they have to go all the way back to the motherboard. Now you will need 60 centimeter USB cables for the furthest one from the motherboard. When you're purchasing these off of Amazon or any major company, you will be receiving 60 centimeters, so you'll be perfectly fine. But if you do custom order them from China, you will need to request 60 centimeters at least. If you want it a little bit longer, I'd go 90 centimeters, but you do not need 90 centimeters for every single cable. You only need them for the very outer edge on this side. Where's the last one? Now when you order these, you do receive a combination of black or blue. They're all the same. When you do order, you do want these nice thick cables. You don't want the real thin ones because that could cause issues. And these are in much higher quality. Alright, so now that you have all the cables plugged in, you're going to start on the very left side and you're going to start plugging in your PCIEs. So go ahead and pull them and go ahead and keep them as high up as you can. Don't get them wound. You want these on top of every cable. You'll plug in your first PCIe to the closest spot. and you'll go from there. And then you'll do the next one. Make sure it's all the way up on the top. You don't want it touching anything else. You don't want to get it stuck on anything. When you're doing this, you want to keep them all pretty similar, so that way you can have good cable management. You can make these nice and clean and not have to worry once you get the entire system set up completely. Not have to worry about any clutter or any issues when you want to replace anything. You'll know where everything is. Easy to repair or do any maintenance.
Yo.
Alright, so now you have all your PCIe one-time slots plugged in. So now you'll have 8 GPUs completely plugged in. And now it's all ready to start powering the GPUs. So what we're going to use is your VGA cables. You'll be using all your VGA cables to power your GPUs. And again, just like with the SATAs and the Molex, we're going to wrap it around this on the outside. That way you have nice cable management. We'll do cable management along this entire bar, make several lanes, and then attach it to the bar completely. So we have 2 8-pins over here. Make sure your 8 pins are all completely attached together. Make sure the line here is together, the 2 pieces. Go ahead and start popping them in. Always make sure it does click and it does lock on. So now that that's all completely assembled, your entire rig is fully ready and it's all ready to go ahead and set up. So now you could go ahead and start cable management, and we're going to attach everything to this bar. And once you're done with the cable management, you're ready to plug in. And what we recommend is to always use an extension cord and a surge box. So we always recommend a surge protector. So what you do is you'll plug both PSUs into your surge protector, and you'll use this to power on and off your device. So the Z270A and the Z270AR motherboards do come with a power button built into the motherboard. Now, if you do not have a power button built into your motherboard, if you're choosing any other motherboard, like a Z270P or a K or any other one of those motherboards where you'll have to bridge it, you do receive a power button and a restart button. So you can go ahead and take your power button and you'll just put it right onto the wires for the power and the reset. You can go ahead and hit this, and then you just follow your BIOS, and inside the BIOS you'll set it to anytime it turns off to restart automatically, and anytime power failure to restart, anything like that. So every time it ever turns off again, if it's you turning it off, or if it's a power surge, or if the rig dies, or if anything like that, it'll restart on its own right away. And the power surge, the surge protector, it helps out. If you want to go ahead and buy the $20 or $30 add 2 PSU chips, where you'll go ahead and plug in a Molex into the chip, and then you'll plug something else in, and it'll connect your 2 power supplies. So whenever one power supply is turned on, it'll power on the other power supply right away. You can go ahead and buy one of those, but we recommend just leaving both power supplies completely on, using a surge protector, and using your surge protector on off to go ahead and turn them on, so that guarantees they both turn on very fast and all within 1 millisecond of each other. That way there is no issues with units not starting or any other issues. So there you go. We're going to go ahead and we'll skip forward to where we have the cable management completely done. So now we are completely done with all the cable management. As you can see, we went ahead, attached most of it to this bar, and we did some cable management on the inside. So now we're pretty clear. Has great airflow. We're gonna have fans pushing this way. We really just use cheap little fans, desktop fans. One desktop fan per system is enough to keep these GPUs completely cool. They run about 55 degrees Celsius to 65 degrees Celsius at a 75% constant fan speed. So we're gonna go ahead and give you a close-up. As you can see, we went ahead, attached all the cables. We use the little Velcro cable ties. These Velcro cable ties across the entire thing. Folded in all the extra cables. These, we are going to be we do stack our units. So these will just be pushed down when we go ahead and pop off these. We'll put in the stacking part, and then we'll stack another unit right on top of this. Now this one is our hybrid system. That's our hybrid. That's the water-cooled GPU. For that one, we went ahead and used two of the fan holding attachments. We attached it to the fan, and that's held in nice and steady, nice and sturdy. And here you go. Here's the back end. Everything's all ready. We're going to plug in an Ethernet, and then we already have our mouse plugged in, and we'll go ahead and start the BIOS. Get the BIOS ready, and then we're going to power this on. It is 8 1070s, which should be running at least 450 to 480 per 1070. The Aorus, they're very great. They're very good 1070s. They run about 470 to 480 at 3.5 plus watts, souls per watt. And then the FTWs, they run about 450 to 470 at 3.5 or greater souls per watt. And these two over here, this one runs a steady 450, around 445 to 455. It's very steady at 3.5 souls per watt. And then this MSI, the Seahawk X with the hybrid, that one will always run about 45 degrees Celsius, and this one runs about 480 souls at about 3.4 souls per watt. And that's what we run these stable. This will run very stable once we go ahead and overclock it. On these ones we usually run, since these ones are 2-pin, they use 14-pin plus. Those ones will usually run about a 60 to 65% TDP at a plus 110 to 115 core and a plus 500 plus 600 memory. And all of these we use on the Equihash. We actually mine Zencash, which runs very well. It's one of the most profitable coins. It has very great potential. So that is the entire finished system. Now it's just ready to go ahead and do the BIOS, put all the miners on it, and go ahead and start them up.